Now joining me, three-time Super Bowl champion with the New England Patriots, now does a great job with NESN, and that is Matt Chatham. Matt, Zach Gelb here, TalkUSA.tv and DARPATV.com. Thank you for joining me, and how you doing on this fine evening?
Doing great, Zach. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I watched your career for many years when you were winning Super Bowl championships with the New England Patriots, but I want to bring you back to one moment, 2003, in the Super Bowl when that streaker ran on the field. Recall that moment for me when you tackled the streaker.
That was just sort of kind of had to happen sort of thing. I mean, we lingered there a bit on the field. Nothing seemed to happen, and it was just kind of the thing to do. The guy needed to be removed. We had a game to play, and just kind of had to be done.
Now, I don't know if you saw this video, but there's a video on YouTube, and I'm sure you have, of the Spanish announcers announcing what happened, and then you just see Teddy Bruschi's face. What do you think was going in the mind of Teddy Bruschi during that? Because he just looks really funny in that clip.
Yeah, he probably the same thing that was going through all of our minds. My buddy Larry is to my right. Don Davis is up there on the front line with me as well. Raves is sitting in the back, and we were all just kind of staring, going, what in God's name is going on here? But, he made a break for it. He came, I don't know if he was so much near me as I guess I just anointed myself to do it. I don't know what was going on in that instance, but it just kind of seemed like, okay, enough of this, let's go, we got a game to play, so that's all it was.
And, of course, that's Larry Izzo, who has a game this weekend. He's the assistant special teams coach. He's been on this show before. He's a great guy. But one last thing from that 2003 moment. It was a really hectic halftime show with the whole incident with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake ripping off her bra. And then you had that moment coming out right before the second half was to get underway. When did you realize how hectic that halftime show was? Did you players know coming out of that gate? I'm sure you didn't, because you guys were preparing for a game, the whole thing that happened with Janet Jackson.
No, not at all. Actually, was totally clueless to that stuff going on. We were deep into football, and obviously the streaker thing I was aware of, but I actually learned most of it in the post-game interviews with a lot of the national media guys, and some of the local guys too. They had come down, and I remember a particular conversation with Dr. Z, Paul Zimmerman from SI for years there, had came over and was telling us all that had happened and kind of catching me up and saying, the Janet Jackson thing, and saying, Matt, you realize, no matter what you've done before now in your career, what you do after, you're always going to be remembered for that. And I was like, thanks. That was just the reality of the situation. You're right. It was chaos there in more ways than one.
Yeah, I remember Tiny Jerome, who he called me from the game, and he said, you're not going to believe it. Chatham just laid out a streaker, because they didn't show it here in America, as we're talking to Matt Chatham of NESN, former New England Patriot, three-time Super Bowl champion. And, Matt, if you watched the game last week, Joe Flacco was terrible. Ed Reed ripped him on a radio interview. What do you think the confidence is right now of the Delaware quarterback?
I don't know. It was a little odd that Ed took that route. I wouldn't go so far as to say slammed him, but I've gotten that general perception from what I've heard people say. I went back and read the comments. He certainly didn't hedge as best he should, but he was willing to mention that they have to play better. And usually these are sort of vanilla comments everyone throws out. We're all going to have to do better, but the fact that he named names, that's a little odd. So, yeah, I would wonder how that affects the locker room at this point, because it's sort of critical time. But they had a rough week, and I think they were as contrite as anyone. I mean, they came out to the post-game podium, Coach Harbaugh, and a lot of the players said, "Hey, great to win, great to advance," but we all know that we can't do that next week to win. So I don't think he's breaking any news here when he's saying that they have to do better. It's always nice when it's the reporters telling you, not your teammates.
Well, yeah, last week he basically said to the reporters, Joe Flacco himself, he goes, if we win this game, I'll have nothing to do with it, according to you guys. It sounds like this guy doesn't have too much confidence. Can you see Bill Belichick probably coming out early and blitzing, trying to take this guy out of the game from a mental standpoint?
I don't know. I'm not sure. This is a team that likes to, pound it with the run and hit you with the big plays, downfield stuff. So I'm not certain that an overly aggressive approach would be necessary, because it may just expose you to some other things they don't want to have happen. This has always been a defense that wins because they win and they play their best when they don't give up the big play. When they do, they get gashed. So an aggressive, just to simply cause him to play poorly, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think the biggest thing with this group is you have to try to match the physicality, and there's a handful of groups like that around the NFL that are sort of built the way the Ravens are. Not that are as good at it as they are, but the Raiders are a team that kind of come to mind. Built as big as anyone else in the league at each of their respective positions, and they're going to be physical on both sides of the ball and all those types of things. But I think Joe Flacco's actually I tend to side with him a bit. That he's taken a rough hit, but this last week, no, not so much. But in weeks past, he hasn't been atrocious. We don't get to see a lot of the Ravens throughout the course of the year. I kind of hear that conventional wisdom that he's playing poorly. You flip on the tape, and all things relative. We're hearing Tim Tebow's the greatest quarterback in the world, and that really isn't the case. And Joe Flacco's the worst quarterback in the world, and that ain't the case either. So, it's all things relative in the NFL, I guess.
We all know that this Patriots defense isn't great. Besides last week, they looked like that 2003 defense of yours with Bruschi getting to the quarterback, William McGinnis doing all that stuff. So this Patriots defense looked a little bit rejuvenated last week with coming off that bye. However, they have a tough task this week going up against Ray Rice. We mentioned the stuff about Joe Flacco. Do you expect this Baltimore Ravens team to come out on the run or the pass first in this game?
Well, I think the way it works oftentimes in the NFL is you try to find a comparable. You try to look back into your annals, I guess, from earlier in the season and figure out who hurt them and how they hurt them. And from the Patriots' point of view, they were actually a very, very good run defense team. And, the pass numbers were accumulating quite a bit early in the season. But they were awfully good in games where teams were more run first. I think the Raiders are another good example of that. But as we got into November, there was some slippage there. And I think the Redskins had a big game on them where they were more of a run first, and Haydu, I believe his name was, put up a really big game. So from the Ravens' point of view, the other games where the Patriots, gave yards was more the Buffalo Bills program where it was spread it out, do 4 and 5 wide receivers. They're not built to do that, I don't believe. So of the two, heads of the coin there, I guess they're probably going to go with the route of trying to establish the run. They're built for that. So let's see if the Patriots have it sewn up. I mean, they certainly did against the Broncos, but that's an entirely different kind of run scheme. So I'm sure they'll be tested early. If they do well with it, that should close up some of the play action and stuff that Baltimore gets off the run.
We're talking to number 58, Matt Chatham. And Matt, last time the Patriots played the Ravens in the playoffs, not the matchup from 2010, a game that I was at, the Ravens were just all over Tom Brady. This Patriots offensive line is very good with Matt Light, Nate Solder, Brian Waters, and Logan Mankins. Break down the Patriots offensive line going up against this dominating Ravens pass rush.
It's a different group. I mean, I think the important point you made is this is not, it's not 2008 or 9 or whatever it was. They've had, I think this was a Mike Reese stat from the week, going back and looking at the roster. I think we're down to 16 guys who were on the team that were there in that last loss.
Yeah, that's right.
So not a ton of carryover there. But from the offensive line point, your center's different, your right guard's different, your right tackle's different. And, a lot of the blocking schemes don't just involve the offensive line, they involve the backs. The quarterback is a bit a part of that. The tight ends are involved as well. And when I say the quarterback's involved, I mean basically if we're going to run more spread offense, and, it's going to be the, spread with 2 tight ends, which is 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, and they're going to spread out a little bit. The quarterback is essentially one of those blockers by virtue of getting rid of the ball quickly. He is a part of the protection. So I think some of the things they do now they didn't do then as much. So and they also didn't have a great success last week of pressuring the quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see. Now Matt Light is getting up there in age, and the dude's a stud. I mean, he's one of my former teammates, and he's had a really great season. He's had some really great battles with Suggs, but he's that veteran savvy. I think a lot of the issues that came up in that earlier game you mentioned were more rush scheme stuff. So I'm pretty sure Dante will have him ready to go. But the depth of that group, the ability to do a lot of different packages, it'd be quite the risk for the Ravens to send a lot of bodies, because if they do, they might get burned.
All you got to do is just listen to Bill Belichick, and he has an ample amount of praise for Ed Reed, the future Hall of Famer. Besides Ed Reed, who's one player on this Ravens defense that the Patriots must key on?
Yeah, it's just so easy. I mean, you'd love to come up with some super insightful answer to that, but the reality is it's Ray Lewis and it's Ed Reed. And Ed really is the number one, and I'd say Ray is too. One of the things that was unique that the Chargers did, one of the games that I looked at where I was trying to find one of those similar comparables, where the closest thing you're going to find on any of the Ravens schedule this year to an offense that at least has the ability to perform like the Patriots do and run some of those same formations. They did some of the 2 tight end sets, but with extended from the formation with Randy McMichael and Antonio Gates. So they did a little bit of that, a little bit that and had a lot of success. And the way you do it is they would actually line up initially with a back in the backfield and motion him out of the backfield, which predicates to you whether or not, it basically alerts you, is it man coverage or not. If Ray leaves the backfield with back, you've done two good things. You have a coverage signal, and now you also have their best player out of the box. So, I think there's a lot of value in trying to get Ray away from the football, as much so as there is with Ed. And, I don't. It's not as easy with Ray because most likely you're going to have a back in the backfield at times, and he's just so disruptive. He's as good in the pass game as he is in the run. So he'd definitely be my number two, but, it is all about Ed Reed.
You look at this Patriots offense, and it has to start with the tight ends. You look at Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez. Aaron Hernandez was spectacular last week with the 4 rushes for 40-plus yards. He was awesome in the slot. He was awesome at the tight end position. And then Rob Gronkowski, he's been a stud ever since he's come here, had the most receiving touchdowns for a tight end this year in the history of the league. I know this is a difficult question to answer. If you were going up against one of these two guys, how would you try to contain them? I just really don't think you could stop this 1-2 punch.
Well, you know what? If it were just the two of them, I think you could. But the problem is, there's 3. There's Wes, and there's also a very reliable guy in Dion, and some other dynamic guys in the backfield. The reason they're so dangerous with 2, you put those 2 on another offense where they're the only 2 studs, and there are schematic ways to take them away. Not wipe them off the board, and they're just too good of players to do that. But they're just such a tough matchup, and I think that's why the Patriots are so difficult, because they have dynamic players in a lot of different spots and tight end bodies that are route running and after the catch and getting separation like receivers do. But then they're also buffered by guys at other positions that require attention as well. So it's really just a full toolbox as much as anything. So they all benefit a little bit from each other, and on a one-on-one basis, each one is close to the top at their position in the entire league. So that's a lot to work with, and it's a tough assignment for any defense.
I had Troy Brown on the show last week, and I basically said to him, Troy, you talk about all these teams, they're preparing for Gronkowski, Welker, and Hernandez, and then I said, watch out. I guarantee you Deion Branch has a big play this week up against the Broncos, and he did. So you're exactly right. When you game plan up against the Patriots, you can concern yourself about Gronkowski, Welker, and Hernandez, but then you also look at Deion Branch, a Super Bowl MVP. He's done a great job. But now going to Tom Brady. Tom Brady, I've seen him play for so many years. I saw him in 2001, 2003, 2004 during the glory days. But this year, he really just looks like he's playing on a mission, and he has one goal in mind, like he does every year, to win a Super Bowl. But when they zoom in on him, he just looks so fierce. Have you kind of noticed that this year about Tom Brady?
He's always been intense. He's always been a great competitor. That's why we've always had the success we did. And I would say, Tom's, I think, just a year younger than me, and I'm long done playing. But I think he probably understands that he'll get to play a finite amount of years here as well. So whether it's 5 or 6 or whatever it is, the opportunities are waning, and he knows he's got a good group. So I think the expectation level is high because it isn't every year that you're going to have this many weapons at your disposal, and the opportunities they've had. They had a great regular season. They're in a great position now, so I think you feel a little bit of that pressure to say, hey, we may have wasted 1 or 2 in the past 3 or 4 years. Let's not waste one now. I mean, I think that just makes common sense. But the guy's intense every day of the week, even if they weren't in this situation.
Matt Chatham joining us right here on the Peerless Boilers Hotline. Zach Gelb with DARPATV.com. Matt, 2 more questions right before we let you run. I saw the piece on ESPN about the snowball. Take me back through that game at the Tuck Rule play. What was going through your mind?
Well, I put myself in the boat that thought Walt Coleman was, I believe he made the correct call, correct? And he stood by it. He was the one that was responsible for the Tuck Rule, I believe. I hope I'm getting the official right. But
yep.
I think at the time I thought we had something there. It wasn't immediately obvious, I think, when we saw it live. But once we saw that first flash up on the big screen, I thought we had a pretty good chance. I mean, again, this thing has been beaten and tortured over the years of history, but it was the right interpretation of the call, whether or not you agree with the rule. So I think at the time we felt like we had the rule on our side. So, there's a lot of things I think that people forget about that had happened in that game, and I think this is always the case in NFL games. Whenever there's a controversial play, I guarantee you we could have taken you back to 2 or 3 plays earlier in the game that were equally controversial on our side that we thought should have been called. So I think I remember a particular play with Bill Romanowski. I think he was there at the time for the Raiders, and I think it was a pass interference call or something like that that didn't go our way. These things happen. But I remember thinking at the time, had it been close or controversial, I could have pointed to several. Teammates of mine could have pointed to several that could have gone our way that didn't. So if there was any sort of fate involved or someone feeling like it was imbalanced, that just wasn't the case. So right call was made, right team won, we moved on.
Did you happen to hear on WEEI the comments from a former teammate of yours in Heath Evans about Eric Mangini?
No.
Oh, well, he basically said that a lot of players were angry at Eric Mangini once he took that Jets job because he didn't come back and do his job up against the Broncos. You were on that team. You went with Mangini to the Jets, and Heath was saying he was trying to recruit guys to come over with him to the Patriots. Did you get that feel in the locker room from Eric Mangini after he got that Jets job returning from that bye week?
No, I wasn't aware of it. Don't know anything about it. I think... I think I was not privy to what was going on then. I had my head buried in my playbook, and I think most of the players. It's surprising me he has that view, but he's welcome to it. I don't know. I mean, if now behind the scenes, if he knew something through some of the coaches that were upset that Eric handled things certain ways, that may be the case. But it never made it to my eyes or ears, so I'm not sure.
Matt Chatham joining us. And Matt, you were great. Last one right before we let you go. Who's playing in Indianapolis this year? Give me your winner on the AFC and NFC side.
This is absolutely not for sentimental reasons. I could care less in that regard, but I really do feel like the best 2 teams remaining are the Patriots and Giants. So I think we're going to see that rematch that people around here are kind of egging for, and I think it'll be a really exciting game. I think, surprisingly, the Giants might be the most balanced team left. Now, do I trust them to put it together 2 or 3 weeks in a row? No, and that's why they had the up and down season they did. But they just seem to have that look. But in the Patriots, this just is not the team from 2 years ago, 3 years ago when they faced the Ravens. This is a much better group. I like how they match up. I think that'll be the Giants and Pats.
Matt, thanks so much. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure watching you play, and now you do a great job on NESN. Thanks so much. Hopefully we'll talk to you again real soon.
All right. Take care, Zach. Thank you.